I am a princess covered in scars, a ghost in an imperial palace that wants me dead. To stay alive, I crawled to Alexander Liu, the powerful court eunuch who once left me for dead, his hands stained with blood. He molded me into an exquisite lie, making me impersonate my dead sister to seduce the all-powerful prime minister. One man loves my false face, while the other is trapped in a deadly game to protect the real woman behind it. In this game stained with blood, am I walking toward the throne or into a bottomless abyss? Eunuch, I beg you, take me in. With nowhere left to turn, I snuck into Alexander Liu's chambers. I knelt by his bed and whispered like a phantom. He wasn't asleep. He heard my voice and slowly opened his eyes, looking straight at me. After a long moment, he threw back the covers and sat up. How did you end up like this? My black hair, once 3 feet long, was now hacked off unevenly, barely reaching my ears. My morning clothes were in tatters, and hardened candle wax clung to my exposed wounds. I gave a faint smile and repeated, I beg you, take me in. Many eunuchs in this palace coveted my body. If he were the one to claim it, I think I would be willing, as long as he gave me a sliver of hope, something to stop despair from pulling me into the abyss. Princess, you do me too much honor. He lowered his gaze, hiding the murderous rage in his eyes. I am a eunuch. Princess, if he hadn't said it, I would have almost forgotten that I was one. Today was the funeral of my mother, concubine Ling. No one attended. No one mourned. No one asked. Wrapped in a thin straw mat, she was carried away by 2 eunuchs. I wanted to follow them, to see where they were taking my poor mother, but a group of princes and princesses surrounded me. In the past, I had meekly called them my brothers and sisters. Now, seeing that I no longer had my mad mother to protect me, they viciously ground their heels into my face and burned my skin with the white candles from the morning hall. They took pleasure in listening to my piercing screams. I hadn't eaten properly in days, so I had no strength left to scream. I curled into a ball, my cries fading to broken, hoarse whimpers. Finding that unsatisfying, they cut off my long hair and scattered it all over the hall. I held out my hand, 2 of its fingernails missing, and said bitterly, Do you have any idea what my life has been like? A flash of deep pain crossed Alexander Liu's dark, narrow eyes. He hesitated, then raised his hand and gently enveloped my fingertips. His thin lips trembled slightly. Princess, what can I do for you? I took off my shoes and socks, climbed onto the bed, and threw myself into his arms, wrapping my own around his lean waist. He had a pleasant scent, cool and subtle. It was a strange contrast to his delicate, almost bewitching face. I rubbed my face against his chest to wipe away my tears. Tonight, stay with me. His whole body went rigid. Only his Adam's apple moved, bobbing repeatedly. I looked up from his embrace. His jaw was sharp and exquisite, like a finely carved piece of jade. I reached up and touched it, pleading, I suffer from insomnia night after night. I just want to sleep safely in your arms. Please don't refuse me. Alexander Liu smiled faintly, his eyes shining like stars forged in fire. He traced the lines of my brow and eyes with his finger, his expression intent and serious. Suddenly, his hand slid down and slipped under my clothes. Lie still. I'll treat your wounds first. I did as he said, letting him peel away the tattered cloth stuck to my skin, piece by piece. A cool sensation spread over me, soothing the fire in my heart. My trembling legs finally stopped shaking. His touch was gentle. The process didn't hurt at all. It was actually quite comforting. I lay on the bed, completely naked, but I felt nothing was wrong. It felt as if, before him, this was how I was meant to be. I pulled his blanket over me. His scent filled my senses, and before I knew it, I was drowsy and fell asleep. In a daze, I heard someone sigh beside my ear. What in the world did concubine Ling teach you? I answered in my dream. What can a madwoman teach me? Only how to go mad myself. As my brothers and sisters tormented me, I had already made up my mind. I didn't ask to live a long life, only to reclaim my dignity. As for why I chose Alexander Liu, first, because my mother had shown him kindness. Second, because he was indebted to me. When Alexander Liu was still an insignificant young eunuch, he didn't even have a surname. He was called Leo. He was once tricked into bringing my mother a potion to induce an abortion. But my mother was an expert in medicine and identified it by the scent alone. He was 10 years old then. Realizing he had been set up, he said nothing, simply knelt on the ground, confessed, and awaited his death. My mother didn't report him. Instead, she told him to visit her palace often, saying she had a lonely daughter. I was 8 that year. Leo became my only friend. 2 months later, my mother gave birth to a stillborn, deformed child and became an ill omen everyone in the palace avoided. The pitiful bit of favor she had from the emperor vanished completely. She began to act erratically, always clutching a pillow and murmuring, "My dear son, you'll be the crown prince one day." Sometimes I couldn't tell if my mother's madness stemmed from my heartless father, the emperor, or from the brother who died before he ever saw the light of day. When I was 13, Leo became the adopted son of the Grand Eunuch Vincent Liu, and was renamed Alexander Liu. Vincent Liu looked down on me, so naturally he didn't want Leo to associate with me anymore. With a single word from Vincent Liu, 5 years of friendship vanished into thin air. He rose through the ranks toward a brilliant future, while I fought with dogs for scraps of food, enduring humiliation just to survive. The next time I saw him was when my mother died suddenly. He glanced at me through the palace gate, and it was that single glance that ignited a greedy desire in me when I had nowhere else to turn. I woke up from a nightmare in the middle of the night, crying out as I sat up. A large, cool hand touched my back, patting it rhythmically. "Don't be afraid, I'm right here." I looked up. Half of Alexander Liu's face was bathed in soft light, the other hidden in shadow, the corners of his eyes tilted upward like peach blossoms. When he focused on someone, his gaze seemed to hold a deep affection, as if he would give his all. "Alexander, you abandoned me once. If you do it again, I swear I'll take you down with me." I forced a difficult smile. "All right." He got up, wet a cloth to clean my hands and face, and then carefully held me, stroking my head and coaxing me back to sleep. I curled up obediently in his arms, listening to his steady, strong heartbeat, but I wasn't sleepy at all. He couldn't soothe the fear in my heart or grant me peace of mind, but at least he knew how to be a quiet companion. As dawn broke, Alexander had to go on duty. He got out of bed very carefully, his every move slow and quiet, as if afraid of waking me. I played along, pretending to be asleep. Only when the room fell silent did I open my eyes. What was the next step? Alexander felt guilty for abandoning me 5 years ago. But how much pity could that guilt truly buy? I let out a self-mocking laugh and climbed out of bed. I was still wearing his undergarment. It was loose and baggy, making me look like some vengeful ghost. I stepped outside, but immediately froze and retreated into the room. A menacing crowd stood outside the door. At their head was Vincent Liu, dressed in a crimson uniform embroidered with flying fish. He had the face of a young man but the hair of an old one, and his eyes were dark and gloomy. I couldn't bear the pressure of his presence. My legs gave out and I collapsed onto the floor. "Which palace are you from?" Seeing my fear, Vincent Liu smiled with satisfaction. "And why are you so ugly?" I instinctively covered my messy, weed-like hair, wishing I could bury my head in the ground. A eunuch beside him barked, "Eunuch Liu is asking you a question. Answer him." I took a deep breath, lowered my hands, and met Vincent Liu's gaze. "I am Luna Wang." It took all my strength to say those words. Vincent Liu seemed to be trying to place the name. After a moment, a look of realization dawned on his face. He covered his mouth with a limp-wristed hand and giggled. "Oh, a little princess, then it seems I should be the one bowing to you?" Just as he finished speaking, Alexander hurried over, flicked his robes, and knelt on one knee before Vincent Liu. "Adoptive father, I made a mistake yesterday." Vincent Liu let out a meaningful laugh, his eyes deep and dark. His gaze flickered between me and Alexander. "Good boy. If you want to play with women, your father will join you. How could you spend a whole night with a woman alone? That's not very filial." Vincent Liu bent down, grabbed Alexander by the hair, and yanked his head back, forcing him to look up. "You know my tastes best. Come on, let's go together." Alexander's eyes darkened for a second. "Yes." Satisfied, Vincent Liu let him go and strolled toward the room. Without a word, Alexander picked me up and followed him. It felt like a snake was slithering up my back, a chill spreading from my very bones. I trembled, huddled in his arms, not daring to say a word. I was terrified my worst fears were about to be confirmed. When Vincent Liu's dry, withered hand touched my skin, my heart plunged into an icy abyss. Murderous intent shot from my eyes. Vincent Liu paid no mind, continuing to spew vulgarities. The next moment, a sticky, warm, metallic liquid splattered across my eyes. Through the blur, I saw Alexander pressed against Vincent Lou's back. One hand clamped over his mouth. His other hand held the hilt of a dagger, which he twisted repeatedly in Vincent Lou's chest. When Vincent Lou stopped struggling, his eyes went vacant. Alexander finally let go of him. He rushed to me and gripped my hands tightly. "Princess, when you feel you can't go on, you have to hold on to your conviction." I turned to him and nodded seriously. He spoke into my ear, his voice deep and steady. "My conviction is you, Princess." I held my breath, trying to steady myself. He patted the top of my head and walked out. A moment later, the sounds of fighting erupted outside, but it was over just as quickly. I opened the door. Alexander was standing among several corpses, calmly wiping blood from his face. The other eunuchs were gone. The silence was eerie. I forced back my fear, managed to smile, and offered a compliment. "You even know how to kill. How impressive. To kill so many people so quickly. What other secrets did he keep? Princess, don't be afraid of me." He looked at me earnestly, his tone sincere. He helped me back inside and began to wash my hands, over and over again, and then his own. He wasn't satisfied until the third basin of water. He told me to wait for him and went out again. A short while later, a palace maid brought a set of sapphire blue clothes and helped me change. Staring at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the person looking back. My messy hair was hidden under a blue silk scarf, revealing a pale, palm-sized face. My eyes were large and starkly defined, a sharp, undisguised edge hidden within them. My nose was small and straight. My lips were a lovely shape, but too thin, the sign of a heartless person. After the maid left, Alexander came in. He leaned against the door with his arms crossed, his deep gaze fixed on my face. His tone was so flat I couldn't read any emotion in it. "Does the princess also wish to marry Julian C?" My heart skipped a beat. Just as I was about to speak, he walked over and covered my eyes with his warm hand. "Princess," he said with a helpless sigh, "your eyes are too honest." Julian C., the prime minister, was powerful enough to shake the court. He was well past the age of marriage but refused to take a wife, rejecting the emperor's decrees time and again. He didn't even have a bed-warming maid in his estate. Everyone whispered behind his back, wondering if the prime minister had some hidden ailment or perhaps other preferences. But even so, countless women still wished to marry into his estate. My sisters, for example, were eagerly hoping for the chance. That's why Alexander used the word also. "Alexander," I began hesitantly, unsure if I should be so direct. The next instant, something soft and warm pressed against my lips, kissing me fiercely as if venting, biting and sucking. He was tall and slim, and his arms held me so tightly I couldn't break free. I could only submit as he conquered my defenses. Not until my lips were swollen and faintly bleeding did he release me. A burning passion had turned his eyes into a sea of fire. One more look and I would be scorched. I frantically pushed him away and scrambled to a far corner, gasping for breath. The kiss was utterly unexpected. But hadn't everything he'd done for me last night been just as unpredictable? I dug my nails into my palm, forcing myself to regain my senses. Alexander walked over, his eyes cool and clear, without a trace of the passion from moments before. "Lunawan, I will help you." As far as I could remember, that was the first time he had ever said my full name. The sound of my name was so simple, yet hearing him say it brought tears to my eyes. It meant our relationship was now closer than that of a princess and a servant. "Alexander, you know what I want, don't you?" I asked, looking at him eagerly. For some reason, I always felt that Alexander could see right through me. He smiled, a slight curl of his lips, and caressed my mouth. "Of course. I was born for you." I stared at him, stunned. How could things between us have come to this? If he had said it was for fame or fortune, I might have believed him a little more. Ultimately, did he kill Vincent Lou for me or for himself? Alexander seemed to read my doubts. He sighed. "It's all right. You may not believe me now, but you will one day." The maid from before called softly from outside the door, "Eunuch Lou, everything is ready." Alexander gently hugged me and whispered in my ear, "Go with her. Hide outside the palace for a few days. I will pave the way for you." Before I could even look at him, a sharp pain struck my neck, and I lost consciousness. Everything went dark. I woke up in a small courtyard. It was tucked away by the mountains and rivers, completely secluded. It was quiet. In the courtyard stood an old matron with streaks of gray at her temples, stern and unsmiling. She told me I was to learn to become someone. But she wouldn't tell me who. She dressed me in red, taught me poise, and told me to be uninhibited and willful, to shed the meekness ingrained in me. On the 12th day, the old matron died. A long sword had pierced her chest. Alexander Liu, dressed in a crimson uniform with flying fish embroidery, looked dashing. He leaned against the window, a complex, unhappy look in his eyes. "Why didn't you run?" he asked. "I trust you," I said, looking at him earnestly. This was the second time I'd said that to him. How pathetic. A royal princess, yet I had to place my hopes in a eunuch. Simply because he still had a shred of pity for me. A forced smile touched his lips. He gestured to me. "Princess, I've come to take you to the palace." I shuffled over to him and stared at the flying fish pattern on his chest. "Have you replaced Vincent Liu?" I asked hesitantly. He nodded slightly, a flash of pain in his eyes. "Princess, do as you wish. Leave the rest to me." "Why?" Tears instantly welled. The terror of the past few days finally overwhelmed me. "Why are you being so good to me?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked away. I jogged to catch up. Seeing his tense jaw, I dared not ask any more questions. I still wasn't sure what Alexander Liu's boundaries were. I didn't dare make a rash move. The moment I saw Prime Minister Julian C., I finally knew who I was being trained to become. The first time he saw me, he blurted out, "Evelyn?" Evelyn Wan was the emperor's most beloved daughter, but her beauty was fated to be short-lived. She passed away just after her coming-of-age ceremony. Sisters do bear some resemblance. And with my short hair and the lower half of my face wrapped in a red scarf, only my dark, cool eyes were visible. Perhaps that made the resemblance even stronger. I guessed. Julian C. was very handsome. His skin was smooth and pale as jade, with sharp brows and bright eyes. He was tall and slender, almost frail, and looked like he would be easy to bully. Especially when he smiled. The two dimples at the corners of his mouth made him seem completely harmless. "May I call you sister?" He looked me up and down, his lips curling into a smile. "That's what I used to call Evelyn. Since you're trying to imitate her, I assume you won't mind." I froze. His directness left me at a loss for words. Alexander Liu stepped out from behind me. He bowed, his voice tinged with cold. "Prime Minister, are you satisfied with this gift?" A sharp pain stabbed at my heart. I was a gift? Wasn't he trying to help me? I glanced at him hesitantly. Alexander Liu's long lashes were lowered, casting a shadow beneath them. His lips were pressed tightly together, his expression completely unreadable. "Not quite. Alexander Liu, you were too hasty. She hasn't even learned a fraction of my sister's grace. Yet you dare bring her to me?" Julian C. said with a smile, but as the sunlight streamed through the window, it illuminated the sadness and loneliness in his eyes. Alexander Liu remained in his bow, unmoving. Julian C. let out a faint laugh. He reached out with pale, thin fingers to touch my eyes. The calluses on his fingertips felt rough against my skin. I couldn't help but flinch and step back. Julian C.'s gaze sharpened. Before I could react, Alexander Liu had already pulled me behind him. "Prime Minister, give me a few more days. I will surely satisfy you," Alexander Liu said, bowing again. "Fine. But remember, if I can help you get rid of Vincent Liu, I can just as easily crush an ant like you." Julian C. walked to my side. His tone was gentle, but his eyes gleamed with a bloodthirsty light. I didn't dare move, forcing myself to stand perfectly still. He seemed satisfied. He looked up and caressed the skin around my eyes again. "Sister, your eyes are so beautiful. The Chixi festival is in a few days. Shall I take you to release flower lanterns?" "Okay," I replied. The moment the word left my mouth, Julian C.'s hand clamped down hard on my shoulder. His fingertips felt like they were trying to dig into my flesh. I bit my lip, endured the pain, and forced myself to look into his eyes, searching for a reason. Julian C.'s amber pupils shone with a glass-like light, clear and innocent. He cocked his head and smiled at me. "Next time, don't agree so quickly. Make me beg you a little more before you say yes." After Julian C. left, only Alexander Liu and I remained in the chamber. I looked at the filthy surroundings, the floor covered in hair, exactly as it was when I left. It seemed the palace staff had already written this place off as an abandoned hall. "Princess, do you not want to marry the Prime Minister?" Alexander Lu's hawk-like gaze was fixed on me, as if trying to see right through me. A tide of humiliation washed over me. I dug my nails into my palm, trying to fight it back, but my eyes couldn't help but turn red. Why did I have such high hopes for Alexander Lu? How could I have expected so much from him? What was I so upset about? Because he had used me as a gift? Or was it because I'd been terrified by Julian C., and he hadn't offered a single word of comfort? "Sorry," I said hoarsely, forcing myself to straighten my back and meet his gaze. He flicked his sleeves. The corners of his mouth curved in an expression that was neither happy nor angry. "If you want to marry him, this is the only way. You've met him today. Do you regret it?" I had no other choice. Either I fight my way to the top, or I become dry bones trampled under someone else's feet. For the next few days, after finishing his duties, Alexander Lu would sneak into my chambers to teach me how to be more like Evelyn. The night before the Chixi festival, the fifth prince, Ethan Wang, drunkenly stumbled into my palace. Alexander Lu was kneeling obediently at my feet while I practiced being arrogant and willful before him. Ethan Wang stood at the door and asked in disbelief, "Eunuch Lu, what are you doing? Why are you kneeling to a lowly mongrel?" Alexander Lu turned his head slowly, his gaze as calm as still water. "I am serving my master." I smiled and walked toward Ethan Wang. He backed away step by step, fear dawning in his eyes. "Fifth brother, what are you afraid of?" I asked in a coquettish voice, a puzzled look on my face. He was the one who suggested cutting my hair that day. I stopped, my gaze turning colder by the second. "Alexander Lu, fifth brother has had too much to drink today. It would be perfectly normal if he were to fall into a well, wouldn't it?" In the next instant, a corner of a robe flashed past. Alexander Lu moved like lightning, appearing behind Ethan Wang and knocking him unconscious with a single chop to the neck. He didn't even have a chance to cry out. Alexander Lu hoisted Ethan Wang onto his shoulder and nimbly carried him to the deep well in the backyard. "Throw him in?" All the malice in me dissipated in an instant. My shoulders slumped, and I bit my lip, refusing to speak. Alexander Lu sighed and waited quietly for my command. After a long moment, I said dejectedly, "Put him down and get me some scissors." I cut off Ethan Wang's hair, leaving it only about a finger's length. Looking at the glossy black locks scattered on the floor, I suddenly felt a wave of satisfaction. The thrill of revenge washed over me. Unable to hide my excitement, I looked at Alexander Lu. "I'm allowed to do this, right?" He was my flesh and blood, after all. I couldn't bring myself to kill him, but I could humiliate his pride, crush his arrogance. Alexander Lu's eyes were clear and gentle, a faint smile playing on his lips, but his words were a complete letdown. "Princess Evelyn is the Prime Minister's most precious treasure. Naturally, he will dote on her no matter what she does." "Then, what about Luna?" I asked cautiously. His expression turned somewhat blank. Even without him saying anything, I understood. Luna has no one to dote on her. Ha! I lifted my chin and forced a brilliant smile back onto my face. "Thank you for the reminder, Eunuch Lu. I will be sure to cling tightly to the Prime Minister's support." Alexander Lu lowered his gaze, hiding his emotions. "May the princess get everything she desires, and may all go smoothly for you." A gust of wind blew past. I turned away resolutely. What does it matter if I'm Luna or Evelyn? I shouldn't care, and I shouldn't expect anyone else to care either. On the day of the Chixi festival, Julian Sai came to find me right after court, without even changing out of his official robes. He was slender, but his cheeks were full. In contrast to his somber formal robes, it made him look rather boyish and innocent. "Sister, I'm going to spend the whole day with you." He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. "No," I said, glancing at him with a disdainful tone. "You're far too boring. A whole day with you would bore me to death." His eyes lit up for a moment. His voice grew even gentler as he swayed my hand back and forth. "I've changed, sister. I promise you'll be satisfied." After refusing twice more, I finally pouted and agreed, feigning helplessness against his pleading. I never thought he'd enjoy such a childish game, but he remained in high spirits. On the way out of the palace, I received an unprecedented amount of attention. I tried my best not to show any fear, holding my head high as I walked under the weight of their stares. "Sister, the fifth prince's new hairstyle is quite fetching," Julian C. murmured beside me, slowing his pace. I beamed, replying smugly, "Jules, you flatter me." Julian Sai's steps faltered. His breathing grew heavy for an instant, but he quickly lowered his gaze, unwilling to reveal any more of his feelings. But he was so happy that a flush of red crept into the corners of his eyes. Who would have thought that the dignified prime minister would get so worked up over being called Jules? It was true, just as Alexander Liu had said. Evelyn Wang was his most precious treasure. After leaving the palace, he held my hand the entire way, leading me straight to the prime minister's estate. His back garden was filled with hibiscus flowers, blazing and passionate, just like the red dress I was wearing. It didn't take a genius to figure out this was also related to Evelyn Wang. Julian C. pointed to a flower and pleaded pitifully, "Sister, please go stand over there. Let me paint a portrait of you, can you?" Under his earnest gaze, I was dazed for a moment. I was about to nod when I snapped back to my senses and quickly put on an arrogant air. "I'm afraid I'll get tired." Julian Sai immediately ordered his attendants to bring over a chaise lounge and continued to coax me with sweet words. His patience was truly boundless. Lying on the chaise, I stared at the clear sky. For a moment, I couldn't tell who was more pathetic, me, treading on thin ice, or Julian Sai, deceiving himself. He painted with intense concentration, as if lost in a beautiful memory. After a long while, he finally stopped painting and waved me over to have a look. The person in the painting had radiant features and a spirited air. She wore a red dress, and her hair was in a soaring top knot. It wasn't me. The steward ran in from the front courtyard to announce that several princes and princesses had come to visit. I quickly hid the complex emotions in my eyes and walked beside Julian C. toward the main hall. The moment I stepped inside, my heart sank. Several princesses were all dressed in vibrant red, with radiant features, spirited expressions, and soaring top knots, as if they had stepped right out of the painting. There were too many clever people in this palace. I had only just gotten close to Julian C., and they had already figured out the reason. I could play the part of Evelyn Wang, but so could they, and perhaps even better. So where did that leave my chances? I snuck a glance at Julian C. He maintained his composure, smiling gracefully and bowing with neither humility nor arrogance, as if he knew nothing. Suddenly, a sharp slap rang out. My face stung. I looked at the enraged woman before me, momentarily unable to recall which of my sisters she was. "Luna Wang, what kind of upbringing did you have? This room is full of your older brothers and sisters. What are you waiting for? Do you not know how to bow?" she said haughtily. I lowered my eyes. When I looked up at her again, a sweet smile bloomed on my face. "My apologies for the discourtesy." After bowing to everyone in the room, I clung to Julian C.'s arm, stood on my tiptoes, and whispered in his ear, "Jules, I'll wait for you to watch the stars with me." Julian C. wrapped his arm around my waist, glanced at me, and gave a roguish smile. "All right." Although I did my best to keep my back straight, a smile on my face, and appear composed as I walked out of the estate, the searing gazes still made me feel like a dog running away with its tail between its legs. The moment I re-entered the palace, Alexander Liu appeared. There wasn't a trace of surprise on his face. He was as calm as a still lake. Tall and handsome, he walked through the sunlight with firm, steady steps. I looked down at our overlapping shadows, and a faint sense of grievance welled up in my heart. "Alexander Liu, is there no chance for me anymore?" I asked softly. Alexander Liu didn't answer. He just moved a little closer to me. When we reached the last palace gate, Alexander Liu stopped and smiled at me. "Princess, never give up hope. You still have me." He had hesitated between saying "this slave" and "me," and in the end, chosen the more dignified pronoun. I nodded firmly and smiled. "I know." After he left, I walked toward my chambers alone, head down, kicking at the pebbles on the path. A dark shadow suddenly fell before me. I looked up to see a matron with a severe expression. She was one of the Empress's women, here to deliver a decree. It accused me of being unfilial, of brazenly wearing red during my mother's mourning period, and declared my punishment was to kneel on the palace path and reflect on my wrongdoings. The Empress, who had never once protected me, had finally remembered I existed. I suddenly realized the princess who slapped me at the Prime Minister's estate was the Empress's daughter. When I left the palace, I was the object of envy and jealousy. Upon my return, I had become a laughingstock. I knelt on the path without a word, meeting the eyes of everyone who mocked me. A heavy rain began to fall. The cold seeped up from my knees and into my bones, and my vision began to blacken. Just as I was about to collapse, a black paper umbrella tilted over my head. "You're not Evelyn after all," Julian C. said calmly, standing in the rain. Evelyn had the pride of the imperial family in her bones. You just have cowardice and incompetence. The pride of the imperial family? I don't have it. But I doubt those princesses who went to the prime minister's estate today have it either. You came all this way just to tell me that? I shifted into a more comfortable position, sitting on the ground. His expression softened. There are no stars tonight, but I still wanted to keep our appointment and wait with you for an outcome. I didn't reply. He squatted down and looked at me playfully. Although Alexander Liu replaced Vincent Liu, the powers within the Western Depot are complex, and he doesn't command everyone's loyalty. I just received word that a few of Vincent Liu's old followers are at the Western Depot right now, trying to assassinate Alexander Liu. I watched him, my expression blank, still not saying a word. Julian C. smiled gently and caressed my face. I don't care if Alexander Liu lives or dies. I just want to know if my sister cares about him. Hasn't Alexander Liu already pledged his loyalty to you? Why won't you save him? I asked. To be valued by me, one must prove their worth. If Alexander Liu doesn't have what it takes to survive today, it just means he's useless. He pressed his forehead against mine and whispered, "Sister, have you found your worth yet?" I wrapped my arms around his neck and buried my face in the crook of it. "Jules, I don't know my worth, but you do, don't you? His coming to find me tonight was proof that he recognized my value, wasn't it?" As soon as I finished speaking, I didn't hesitate. I pulled the short dagger from my sleeve and plunged it into his shoulder. "Help! There's an assassin! The Prime Minister is injured." I screamed in terror. Julian C. clutched his wound, his gaze as cold as ice. "Luna Wang, are you insane?" A commotion sounded in the distance. It was the Imperial Guard on their nightly patrol. "You are a court official, yet you trespassed into the inner palace in the middle of the night. That is a grave offense." I held his arm. "Why don't we just say you were chasing an assassin?" A cruel smile played on his lips. "I never realized you had this kind of nerve. Thank you for your cooperation, Prime Minister." He didn't kill me. Instead, he gave me a chance to explain. This meant my gamble had paid off. In his eyes, I truly had value. The Imperial Guard arrived, saw that Julian Sai was injured, and immediately grew tense. Many of them were eager for a chance to prove themselves. I pointed toward the Western Depot and told them the assassin had fled in that direction. They immediately readied themselves for battle and rushed toward the Western Depot. In my desperation, this was the only solution I could think of. Wound Julian Sai, alert the Imperial Guard, and get them to rush to the Western Depot to discover the fight happening inside. To risk offending the powerful Julian Sai just to buy Alexander Liu a chance at survival. I think I really had gone mad. Turning back to face Julian C's ambivalent expression, half smiling and half furious, I asked with lingering fear, "Did I hurt you?" He closed the distance between us and, in front of the remaining Imperial Guards, pinned me against a wall. "Sister, I'm jealous." For a second, I was stunned. What was he jealous of? Before I could ask, Julian C. swept me up in his arms and carried me into my chambers. The imperial physician who had rushed over to treat him was ordered instead to tend to the bruises on my knees. The atmosphere in the hall was heavy. I couldn't stand it any longer and tugged on his sleeve. "Is there any news?" His eyes were smiling, but his voice was thick with anger. "Do you really think I'm some magnanimous man?" I lowered my head and whispered, "I'm sorry. When we were young, Alexander Liu was my friend. He was there for me. And when I was on the verge of death, he pulled me back. Even if his kindness toward me was mixed with calculation, I didn't want him to die." Julian C. didn't speak again, just watched me suffer with cold eyes. I don't know how much time passed, but he finally lost interest. He offered one last sentence before turning to go. "Sister, you'd better start thinking about how you're going to compensate me." As soon as he left, I prepared to find Alexander Liu. But the moment I stepped outside, 2 palace maids blocked my path. "Princess, the Prime Minister has instructed you to rest well." That knife wound angered Julian Sai. He placed me under house arrest in the palace. I wasn't allowed to leave or see anyone. On the 7th day, he arrived with a set of sapphire blue riding clothes and announced he was taking me hunting. Only then was I free again. We rode single file through the deep forest, exchanging idle chatter as we went. Suddenly, he pulled his reins tight, turned, and gave me a brilliant smile. His eyes held undisguised admiration. "You're becoming quite composed," he said. "Is that a compliment for Luna Wang?" I asked, squinting against the bright sun as I smiled back. He let out a laugh, clearly amused by my comment. "Come here," he said gently, holding out his hand. I took it, and with a sharp tug, he pulled me through the air and into his lap. Before I could recover from the shock, he rested his chin on my shoulder and whispered, "I can tell the difference." He spent most of the day teaching me archery, even praising my natural talent. I found myself understanding him less and less. Could he truly tell the difference, or was he just pretending? We returned to the palace at sunset. At the gate, I saw Alexander Liu. He didn't approach, simply bowing from a distance with a remote, polite smile. A bad feeling crept over me. I wanted to approach him, but a maidservant suddenly appeared, blocking my path. "Princess, the Prime Minister does not wish for you to associate so closely with eunuch Liu." "Is the Prime Minister putting me under house arrest again?" I asked, frowning. "You misunderstand, Princess. The Prime Minister was concerned you had no one to attend to you, so he sent me to serve you." This maid's name was Autumn. It was a common name, but her skills were anything but. I once saw her thrust a single chopstick through an assassin's throat. She remained perfectly calm, even as blood sprayed from the wound. "Are you from the Empress?" I asked, holding out a handkerchief to her. She took it and wiped her hands. "I dare not speculate," she said. Another dark figure flashed past the window, and Autumn quickly gave chase. I sat on a nearby stool, watching the flickering candlelight, and a sudden warmth spread through my heart. Now I had someone to protect me. A soft sound made the candle flame waver. Alexander Liu vaulted in through the window, his brocade robes looking exceptionally vivid against the night. "Are you here to kill me?" I asked, propping my head on my hand. Alexander Liu's expression darkened. He bowed respectfully. "Princess, I would never harm you." "Then why did you deliberately lure Autumn away?" The tips of his ears turned a deep red. "I wanted to see you." "That's all?" "That's all." My eyes grew hot, and I quickly looked down to hide my reaction. "For the past few days, I was worried you were dead. Why didn't you come see me then?" Alexander Liu lowered his gaze, his voice trembling slightly. "Thank you for saving my life, Princess. I will do everything in my power to help you." "Alexander Liu, do you really know what I want?" I stepped closer, looking straight into his eyes. He pressed his lips together, his gaze growing complicated. After a long moment, he said softly, "Marrying Julian C will give you the power to protect yourself and someone to rely on." I gave a bitter smile. "If I marry Julian C, I'll spend my entire life as Evelyn Wang's shadow. That's not what I call having power or someone to rely on. I belong to you, Princess. I am your support. Rest assured, my loyalty is to you and you alone," Alexander Liu said, each word slow and firm. I tilted my head and smiled without a word. Everyone in the palace knew that Alexander Liu was an ungrateful wretch who had betrayed his own adoptive father to become Julian C's lapdog. He'd even once told Julian Sai that I was a gift. So how could I possibly believe him when he claimed, "My loyalty is to you and you alone"? "I will take my leave. Take care, Princess." Alexander Liu glanced toward the door, then nimbly vaulted back out the window and was gone. A moment later, Autumn ran back in. Seeing I was unharmed, she breathed a sigh of relief. I lay awake all night, watching the moon fade from the dark blue sky as orange light broke through the clouds. Around noon, a scandal rocked the palace. The 5th prince had died from overindulgence, expiring beneath a woman. The news reached me shortly after the eunuch who delivered the imperial edict for my marriage had departed. "Autumn, was it your master?" I asked, my voice trembling. If it was Julian C, then the man was truly terrifying. The emperor's sudden decree of marriage was the result of Julian's mix of coercion and persuasion during the morning court session. Why he wanted to marry me, I had no idea. The man seemed to do as he pleased, when he pleased. "I do not know," Autumn replied. It was the answer I expected. Autumn's loyalty wasn't to me, so how could she possibly tell me the truth? The shameful cause of the fifth prince's death enraged the emperor. He stripped the fifth prince's mother of her title and banished her, along with the prince and princess she had borne, to a remote palace. The empress's faction was overjoyed. The threat to her son's position as crown prince was now gone. The remaining princes were either too young or too sickly. Julian C. never clearly stated who he supported or which side he was on. If he was truly behind the fifth prince's death, I supposed he must be one of the crown prince's men. That was my guess. Even after the fifth prince's funeral was over, Julian C. never came to see me. But the attitude of everyone else in the palace toward me had become markedly more respectful. The empress even personally selected a magnificent palace for me to move into. On the first night in my new quarters, I was drifting in and out of sleep when I suddenly felt an arm wrap around my waist. I was about to cry out when the person let out a weary sigh and held me tighter. "Sister, don't move." His warm breath on my skin sent a tingling itch through me. I swallowed hard, my body rigid. Waiting for dawn with my eyes wide open was agonizing. But Julian C. slept soundly, holding me without moving an inch. He even missed the morning court session. "Sister, I have been diligent in my duties since I took office. This is the first time I've ever missed morning court." He pulled me to sit before the bronze mirror and began to comb my hair. I watched him in the mirror and noticed he was in a very good mood. The corners of his lips were curved in a smile that never left his face. "Are you really going to marry me?" The question had been bothering me for a long time. After so many years of lying low, this sudden turn of events felt unreal. He truly was in a good mood. Hearing my question, he paused and looked at me with a beaming smile, his words holding a rare sincerity. "No matter how hard I try, I can only add to Evelyn Wan's life, which is already perfect. But you are the exact opposite, common as a weed, yet fiercely resilient. You would die without me. I am your entire world." I smiled and nodded, feeling surprisingly calm inside. So that was my value. Julian C. said I would die without him, but he was wrong. The one who truly saved me was Alexander Liu. I would never forget the day of my mother's funeral. How utterly hopeless and empty I felt. It was he who reawakened my will to live. "Sister, many people must have come to flatter you these past few days. Don't be afraid. Avenge your grudges, settle your scores. I have your back." He leaned over from behind and wrapped his arms around me, gently rubbing his chin against my neck. I didn't do as Julian C. said, avenge my grudges and settle my scores. On the contrary, I was very kind to all my old enemies. When they gave me gifts, I praised them sincerely. I never refused their invitations. I also made a point of praising one person in front of another. Autumn didn't understand why I took such pleasure in it. I smiled and said, "Perhaps I've been too lonely growing up. As soon as someone talks to me or plays with me, I just can't help myself." Autumn was half convinced and didn't ask any more questions. A few days later, because I had blatantly displayed the coral statue the third princess gave me in the main hall, the first princess grew resentful. She began making veiled insults about the third princess in my presence. Others who wanted to curry favor with the first princess quickly joined in. A new kind of faction was forming. My palace was now filled with spies. In less than 2 days, every kind word and every cruel one had reached the third princess's ears. The two sisters were now openly hostile. The relationships in the harem are a tangled web. What looked like a simple conflict between two people was actually a power struggle between several factions, and the birth of a new one. By now, Autumn completely understood my methods. Before, they would gang up on others and act high and mighty. Now, for a scrap of personal gain, they've turned on each other, fighting for power. It's so ironic, so amusing. Watching them bend their backs and bow their heads, inch by inch, it brings a far deeper satisfaction than simply killing them. Autumn set down the tea and peeked up at me. "You are very clever, princess." I picked up the cup and took a small sip, the smile not reaching my eyes. The night grew deeper, the dew heavy. I was leaning against the doorframe in my undergarments, admiring the moon. A gust of wind blew past, making me shiver. Just as I was about to go back inside, a hand suddenly grabbed my wrist, pulling me into an embrace that smelled of wine. When I collected myself, I gently wrapped my arms around his waist and smiled. Why are you here so late again? The only person who could brazenly barge into my palace at this hour was Julian C. I missed you. He pressed close to my ear, his tone gentle, with an almost imperceptible hint of grievance. You've never once said you missed me. Jules, I missed you, I said softly. He didn't reply for a long time. Held tightly in his arms, I couldn't see his expression or tell if he was pleased or angry. It made me uneasy. Just as I was about to push him away, he sighed. Sister, sooner or later, you will truly fall in love with me. Why did he want me to fall in love with him? Was it a desire for conquest? I had never thought about romance. Ever since I was a child, I had built thick walls around my heart, and very few people could ever get inside. Julian C. stayed in my palace again. Muddled by wine, he began to remove my clothes. My skin was not smooth and fair like that of other royal ladies. 2 ugly vine-like scars snaked across my waist and abdomen. When he saw them, a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. The hand roaming over my body came to a halt. I pulled the brocade quilt over myself and smiled. If the Prime Minister goes to the Emperor now to call off the wedding, there's still time. He caressed my face. Who did this? The very same royal brothers and sisters who visit me every day. They were afraid I would retaliate, so they tried to drive a wedge between Julian C. and me, while feigning kindness and trying to please me. No one will ever dare to bully you again. Julian C. spoke with deep affection, but in the end, he couldn't bring himself to continue. He got dressed and left. Looking at the still warm bed, I felt an inexplicable urge to laugh. When I was covered in wounds, the image of Alexander Liu applying medicine to me, his eyes lowered in concentration, felt as if it were happening all over again. He was the one who wasn't repulsed. For several days, Julian C. did not come. I continued to play along with those who came to curry favor, but inside, I was growing flustered. I was afraid Julian C. had really asked the Emperor to call off the wedding. On the evening of the 7th day, dark clouds rolled across the deep blue sky, leaving only a sliver of orange sunset clinging to the horizon. I received a verbal decree from the Emperor. He had given me special permission to participate in the royal hunt alongside the princes. The Emperor had a strong dislike for his daughters. The only exception was Evelyn Wang, and only because he favored her mother. As for the rest of us, he never paid us any mind. We had certainly never been granted the privilege of hunting alongside the princes and ministers. Now, I was the first. Thinking of how Julian C. had recently taken me hunting and taught me archery, it all became clear. It seemed this was his plan all along. Before I went to bed, the young eunuch serving me gave me a signal. His master was coming tonight. I stared at the flickering candlelight for a long time before a dark figure floated down from the roof. He was dressed in black night attire, a cloth hiding his face, revealing only a pair of glistening dark eyes. I grew tense, my body stiffening involuntarily. Princess, it's me. Alexander Liu pulled down the black cloth, revealing his fair, handsome face. I know, but I'm still scared, I said with a self-deprecating laugh. A glimmer of pity appeared in his eyes. Your days of fear and anxiety will be over soon. Just endure it a little longer. Hearing those words from him inexplicably made my eyes sting with unshed tears. I suppressed my emotions and smiled. Are you pleased with the gold and jewels I sent you as a token of my respect? Julian C. had placed a maid in my palace, and Alexander Liu had placed a eunuch. In recent days, I had sent most of the valuables I received to Alexander Liu, so he could use them to build connections and strengthen his power. Thank you, Princess. Rest assured, I will do my utmost to plan for your future. He took an exquisite token from his robes and handed it to me. These are the death-sworn soldiers I have trained for you. They are hidden within the Eastern Depot and await your command. Alexander Liu had secretly established a force in the Eastern Depot. Everyone else only knew he belonged to the Western Depot. I played with the token, unable to hide my excitement. Does Julian C. know? He does not. This is a secret between you and me. He smiled faintly and reached out to ruffle my hair. Luna Wang, you're the only friend I've had since we were children, and the only person I care about, so whatever you want, I'll help you get it. As soon as he finished speaking, he flew off into the night, and silence returned. A faint unease grew in my heart. The Alexander Liu I saw tonight felt particularly strange, particularly tender. The royal hunt was a magnificent affair. I'd thought I was the only princess participating, so I was surprised to see the one who had slapped me before was also there. She was my sixth sister, the Empress's youngest daughter. Dressed in a striking crimson riding outfit and mounted on a chestnut horse, she shot me a sidelong glance filled with undisguised contempt. Perhaps the Empress had warned her, because she was unusually restrained today. Despite her obvious dislike for me, she refrained from causing any trouble. The Crown Prince, along with a group of ministers, started an archery competition. I expected Julian C. to take first place. After all, I had seen his skill. But instead, he played second fiddle to the Crown Prince the entire time. What good is being so powerful if you still have to curry favor with others? I sneered inwardly. When Julian finally had a moment to himself, he joined me, and I teased him about it. He suddenly swung up onto my horse, settling in behind me. Taking my hand in his, he helped me draw a bow. When I saw where the arrow was pointed, my heart skipped a beat. It was aimed directly at the sixth princess. She bullied you. You might not hold a grudge, but I do. Julian's tone was as casual as if he were discussing the weather. My hand began to tremble. He chuckled. Silly sister. Then, he guided my hand, slowly shifted our aim, and let the arrow fly. It struck a rabbit. Before I could even sigh in relief, another arrow flew from the opposite direction, whistling through the air before burying itself deep in my sixth sister's chest. A crimson flower blossomed on her chest. She fell from her horse, dead before her eyes could even close. Julian casually covered my eyes and whispered in my ear, "Sister, are you happy?" I pulled his hand away and stared at my sister's body. I managed to force a smile. Happy. The word had barely left my lips when a tear fell onto Julian's arm. While everyone was still reeling from the sixth princess's death, the emperor and the crown prince were suddenly surrounded by a group of assassins. By the time Julian and I rushed over, the crown prince was already dead. The assassins were now converging on my father, the emperor. Seeing a sword about to strike my father, Julian lunged forward, shielding him as he engaged the assassins. The assassins had gambled on a swift victory. Having lost their advantage, their defeat was certain. One by one, they slit their own throats without hesitation. Only the assassin in the center remained, his eyes showing a hint of reluctance as he delayed the final act. The imperial guards subdued him, pulled off his mask, and revealed a fair, handsome face. I felt as if I'd been struck by lightning. I could barely stand. How could it be Alexander Liu? My father was enraged. He snatched a sword from a guard and lunged to kill him, but Julian stopped him. Your Majesty, I've merely exchanged a few words with this traitor, and already people in the palace whisper that he works for me. Today he has committed a heinous crime. I implore you to investigate this matter thoroughly, to clear my name and silence the gossip. Clearing his name wasn't the point. Silencing the gossip was. Alexander Liu had been Julian's weapon, helping him achieve his goals. Now, he had to take the fall for everything. I pressed my hand tightly against my chest, as if that was the only way to stop the wrenching pain. No wonder Julian would still marry me, even though I had nothing to offer. Julian had promised he would get me whatever I wanted. It turns out Alexander was using his own life to get it for me. The hunt was called off. We returned to the palace. Alexander Liu was thrown into the imperial dungeon, where a fate worse than death awaited him. The next day, Julian personally took me to watch Alexander's torture. The moment I left the dungeon, my legs gave way. I collapsed to the ground, the image of the jailer's blade slicing off small pieces of Alexander's skin replaying in my mind. I could still hear the sizzle of the smoldering branding iron as it burned his flesh. Sister, why do you seem more shaken than I am? Julian knelt beside me, his large hand gently stroking my back. I tried to hold it back, but I couldn't. I retched violently. He showed no disgust. He took out a handkerchief, carefully wiped my lips, then leaned in close and murmured softly in my ear. Alexander was tortured by Vincent Liu. His will is far stronger than any ordinary man's. Besides, this was the deal he made with me. Don't be afraid, sister. I won't fall. I can still protect you. I used to think Alexander had abandoned me to curry favor with the powerful. I never knew he had endured inhuman torture at the hands of Vincent Liu, or that he had only kept his distance to protect me from being implicated. Tears blurring my vision, I nodded, clinging to Julian's sleeve for dear life. Julian's gaze darkened. He looked toward the imperial dungeon, a scornful smile playing on his lips. How sad Alexander would be if he knew you were only thinking of saving yourself right now. He thought I was afraid of being dragged down with Alexander. I smiled bitterly. Few people believe in loyalty through thick and thin. It's far more common to kick a man when he's down. But in the end, I had completely misread Julian C. Just as I was about to lead the loyal guards, Alexander had left me on a night raid of the dungeon. Julian appeared before me, alone. His face wore a rare, somber expression. Luna Wang. He spoke my name, each word heavy with meaning. I straightened my back and met his gaze without flinching. I'm here. What are you doing? His voice held a suppressed rage, but his eyes were misty, hiding his true emotions. I clutched the token in my hand, my eyes red-rimmed, as I said, word by word, saving the man I love. The mist in his eyes cleared, replaced by a fierce glare. His jaw tightened as he forced the words through his teeth. And which man do you love? Alexander Liu? As I said his name, I felt a sense of relief. Ever since I was a child, I had built thick walls around my heart. Few people could ever get in. But Alexander had been inside those walls from the very beginning. Julian snorted, the corners of his eyes slowly turning red. Alexander has confessed. He's scheduled for public execution at noon tomorrow. If you go now, not only will you fail to save him, you'll render all his suffering meaningless. Do you really not know what he wants? From the beginning, I was always asking Alexander if he knew what I wanted. I never once stopped to think about what he wanted. Julian's lips slowly curled into a smile, but a flash of pain crossed his eyes. He wants you to have everything you wish for, and to live a safe and peaceful life. Tears instantly welled up, and a tide of despair washed over me. Princess, when you feel you can't go on, you must rely on your faith to get you through. My faith is you, Princess. Princess, you just do what you want to do, leave the rest to me. May all your wishes come true, Princess. May everything go smoothly for you. Princess, no matter what, never give up hope. You still have me. Fool. So everything he said was true, and I was still thinking of testing him further. Luna Wang, ever since you dared to stab me for a eunuch, I haven't seen you as Evelyn anymore. I can tell the difference. You are Luna Wang. Julian walked toward me and gripped my shoulders firmly. Trust me, I will not fail you in this lifetime. I stared at him, stunned. Please, Luna Wang. His eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Before I was afraid of death. Now, I'm not. Because the one person who was completely devoted to me, who had eyes only for me, will be with me forever. I took a deep breath and said, Move. I'm going to see him. Even if the place is heavily guarded, you're still going to try and force your way in? Julian's voice had calmed. Yes. Do you know why I was so determined to bring down the Empress's family? He suddenly smiled, and the ice in his eyes seemed to melt, revealing a hint of spring. I frowned, watching him in silence. Your mother, the consort, died at the hands of the Empress. Your brother, the fourth prince, is frail and sickly, also because of her. He reached out and ruffled my hair. The reason I needed Alexander to take the fall for this crime is because I want to deliver this empire, clean and whole, into the hands of the fourth prince. Don't blame me. Blame Julian? I gave a sad smile, speechless. If I hadn't gotten involved with Alexander in the first place, I wouldn't have forced him into this position. Let me go see him. My knees gave way, and I knelt on the ground. Julian squatted down and repeated, Don't blame me. I like you. Before he finished speaking, I felt a sharp pain in my neck and lost consciousness. When I woke up, the world outside was pitch black. Rain was pouring down in a deafening torrent. I lay on the bed in a daze, a hollow shell. The door was pushed open, letting in a gust of damp, cold wind. A young-looking eunuch bowed respectfully and handed me 2 letters and a sandalwood box. One letter was Alexander Liu's confession. In it, he stated that the deaths of the crown prince, the 5th prince, and the 6th princess were all carried out under Julian C's orders. The other letter was for me from Alexander. He told me he'd made a deal with Julian. Once he completed his task, Julian would marry me, giving me honor and status. And if Julian ever broke his promise, I could use the confession to control him. The last line of the letter read, Princess, live well. There are so many beautiful things in this world that you've never had and I've never had, so go and experience them for me. It was signed, Leo, a final letter. So much had happened. I was so exhausted, I'd almost forgotten that Alexander Liu was once my Leo. Oh, Leo, I owe you so much. How could I ever refuse you? Inside the sandalwood box was a silver comb. A comb given to a friend means farewell. Given to a lover, it means growing old together. Oh, Leo, did you want to say goodbye? Or did you want to grow old with me? Oh, Leo, I can marry Julian now. He said he likes me, and I still have the confession and the loyal guards you left me. You see, marrying Julian gives me someone to rely on and the power to protect myself. You made it all happen. You're amazing. My little eunuch, I like you. Can I change my wish? In the 3rd year of the Zongwei era, my father named the 4th prince as crown prince. In the same year, I married the prime minister, Julian C. The wedding was magnificent and grand, an honor no other princess had ever received. My mother was posthumously named imperial noble consort, and her remains were moved to the imperial mausoleum. After the wedding, Julian and I treated each other with polite respect. We never spoke of the past. I suggested he take concubines. The 1st year, he refused. The 2nd year, after the crown prince ascended the throne, I brought it up again. Julian agreed. He said, "This way, your heart can be at peace, and you can devote yourself to his memory." Leo, people like us are too cautious. We shrink back from so many beautiful things. And so, in a lifetime, we only have enough courage for one person. No matter how good anyone else might be, our hearts have no room for them. Julian finally understood me.